We are looking forward to working with not only our consultants, but working with our community partners, our families, to make sure that this process goes in a way that everyone is understanding and is what's best for all of our students. Before we go any further, I'd just like to make a few recognitions of some folks that are here, members of our Board of Education. Mr. Charlie Miller's here. We have Ms. Ellen Milligan, Mr. Ed Lemon, and Mr. Gerald Benton. They're all here. What we're here to do tonight, of course, is to just give information to the public about how the redistricting process will take place, what steps we're taking, how you will be able to give your input, and what process our consultants will take throughout this entire process, phase 1 and phase 2 as well. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce President of Cropper GIS, Mr. Matthew Cropper.
Thank you, sir.
Much. I've got a mic. Yes, sir. So thank you, Dr. Oats, and thank you all for coming.
If you would use this mic for everybody else, your mic is for live stream.
Okay, will do. Yep.
Thank you. Pardon.
So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you guys coming and your involvement in this process. It's really important. The way that we do this work is to have an open door in the process and make sure that the public is involved and can participate and provide feedback from the start. So it's a really critical part of the way that we do this kind of work, and it's a key to success is making sure that the public is informed and knows what's happening as the work commences and things like that. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to inform the public about the upcoming process and how you guys can follow and participate in the process. We don't have any maps to share tonight. There are no options that have even been drafted at this point. We're really just at the very entry level phase of this process, getting things started. But tonight is not a format where questions are going to be taken and answers or an open mic type of format, but it's really an information delivery. So all of this information that I'm sharing, including this presentation, is now available online. There's a redistricting page that's designed for this process. So anybody who couldn't make it to the meeting tonight can go online and start to follow the process, as well as the live stream, the recording of this presentation as well. So the format of this process is to inform you on who we are as consultants, why there's a need to redistrict, the timeline and when any redistricting is going to be implemented, rules that we're going to follow when evaluating redistricting and the viability of looking at different options, and where you guys can find information and where you can go back to refer and keep track of the progress of the process and see what's being shared and how you can provide input. And then also a timeline for key meetings, because we have some meetings scheduled in the future where we're going to invite the public and actually come look at maps. So a little about who we are. We are Cropper GIS Consulting, and we're based out of Ohio, but we work with school districts all over the country, everywhere from 2,000 to 200,000 students. I think we're working on about 6 or 7 different redistricting studies right now across the country. We're working in New Hanover County right now. We're also working in Wayne County Public Schools. We've done work in Union and Cabarrus around Charlotte, and so we've done a lot of work in North Carolina, and as well as other school districts across the U.S. And so we bring to the table knowledge of what has and what hasn't worked in schools and communities across the country, and we also bring a GIS, which is an efficient mapping system where we can map out all the students and find out how many kids live in different subdivisions, and if we move a line one way or the other, we can really accurately understand how many students we would be moving so that we can make efficient and informed decisions. I am Matthew Cropper. I have 20 years of experience or more doing this kind of work with districts all over the U.S. Managing this kind of work, our redistricting is really our specialty and the kind of work that we get called in to do quite a bit. I also, in addition to working with school districts, I also work with the U.S. Department of Justice as a consultant as an expert for federal desegregation cases and things like that, but that's not what we're here for. And so just have a lot of experience in doing this kind of work and honored to be working working here with this community. Dr. McKibben is with us as well. He's back here. He's going to talk a little bit about here in a little bit. But he's our demographer, and he works on, he's the population forecaster. He forecasts enrollment, and he's done some work in Brunswick County. He's going to share a little bit about that with you. But he is also, he and I have worked side by side on all these projects that I've mentioned, and we really work together. We're really business partners as we work with communities and schools across the United States. So why are we here, and why is there a need to redistrict? The district is currently adding, they have added elementary space, and they're currently adding middle school space to address overcrowding, and particularly in this northern part of the county. A new middle school, Town Creek Middle School, is scheduled to open in fall 2020, which will help provide capacity relief to middle schools in this region. So we first off have to establish a boundary for the new middle school. That's one of the key objectives that we have in front of us. Also, there is, in addition to establishing a new boundary for the middle school, Belleville Elementary School is overcrowded, and they need capacity relief. The district has done things to help address and be proactive to try to help enable that by putting expansions on a couple of schools in this area. Lincoln Elementary and Town Creek Elementary both have had six room additions to their classrooms, and that's intended to help provide relief and balance utilization in this area. So in addition to the middle school boundaries, we're also going to be looking at ways to provide some capacity relief to Belleville Elementary through some moving boundary lines. You can see that this is considered a phase 1 component of our work, and we are tasked to basically work through this process all the way up through December, and December is when we are presenting the final redistricting options and recommendations to the school board for their consideration. But you can see here we are in October in this first public information session to share some things with you. We will be working, and we've been working to build some of the tools and the data sets and things like that so that we can really start to look at boundaries, and we're going to be doing that starting now and then working through towards a November 18th time, and that's where we're going to invite the public to come out and look at some maps, and we're going to tell you a little bit about the maps and how the maps were formulated, and it'll give you an understanding of how the maps look, and then we're going to invite the public to come look at maps with us, and we have an internal planning team that's within the district that's going to be around maps, as well as myself and consultants. And we'll be there to answer questions that you guys have about the maps and talk with you one-on-one with the maps. And there will also be a survey in this November, when this November meeting kicks off, to ask you specific questions about those maps so that we can really get some feedback from everybody and hear what the public has to say and get some of their input. But our really focus on this first phase is to present a recommendation to the board, or some options to the board, on December 17th of this year. And then once that information is delivered to the board, typically they receive that recommendation, they receive the options, and then they go through a process of evaluating those, and then typically a board will vote on the following school board meeting. Sometimes they'll vote on that evening, but typically they'll vote on a meeting after the information has been presented to them. So there is a phase 2 component of the work that I mentioned, and the phase 2 component really won't take full steam until fall of 2020. So we are going to be working on phase 2 as we continue through this process and even into next year. But the phase 2 is basically looking at the district as a whole, a comprehensive look at the district, and evaluating all of your schools and looking at the capacity and determining if there is any need for additional space in the county and where it needs to go. And we will be working with the county and with the district, using our expertise to provide some recommendations on where new schools should be added, or maybe expansions and things like that, to address long-term needs as it relates to your capacity. When we get into that process in phase 2, we will be looking at moving boundary lines also to incorporate any suggested space. And so it should be understood that when we get into that process, that any level could be impacted, elementary, middle, and high school in the whole county. But for this phase 1, our focus is more targeted to the northern part of the county. We're looking at the new middle school and potentially helping to provide some balance of relief in the elementary schools in this part of the county. But phase 2, we're looking at comprehensive, looking at the entire county as a whole when we start getting into that. And that's expected to occur, you see that we're collecting new data in October of next year. We're going to get new enrollment data from the district and update our statistics with current enrollment as of that time. And then we'll be looking at options, and then we'll also go through a series of information sessions like this to inform the public and give you an update on the progress and share maps with you and things like that. And that presentation for Phase 2 is expected to occur in January of 2021. So we're in here for a year at least, or a little bit longer, and we're honored to be working with you guys as the public and also the district, and working with you on this process. The focus is to develop 2 to 3 redistricting scenarios for each phase for the district and the public to consider. So I think the board is expecting us to deliver a couple of options to them for them to consider and evaluate. So we were hired by the district to facilitate and manage this process. We are tasked to develop some supporting materials. So as I said, Dr. McKibben is here, and he is tasked to do an updated to the demographic study, and he's going to talk a little bit about that here in a second. And also we're developing other information and tools to help enable you guys to understand what's going on, and also to help us efficiently and evaluate your boundaries in this district. We're facilitating the process and working with the district to develop strategies and ideas to engage the public and make sure the public is informed, and to empower you guys through this process. And then finally, to leverage our expertise, like I said, with our background in technology and also our experience. That's really why we are, what our task is. So there is a set of criteria that we're looking at, that we follow when we start to evaluate boundary lines. And basically, as we look at moving a line one way or the other, we always come back to these criteria and asking ourselves, are we best adhering to these criteria if at all possible? There may be times when we may not be able to fully adhere to these criteria, but we certainly will be focused on these. And these are, to the greatest extent possible, keep students at a neighborhood school. So we want to try to keep students as close to their homes, the schools as close to their homes as possible, knowing that this county is pretty big in terms of geography in this area. And there could be some cases, and we haven't looked at boundaries yet, but there could be some cases where a neighborhood or a community is zoned to a school that's further away than their closest school. There's some things that we just can't control, the location of schools, the number of students that live in the various subdivisions, and things like that. But we certainly will be looking at that and honoring that to the best of our ability. To the greatest extent possible, we want to keep the maximum student numbers for high schools at 1,400, middle schools at 750, and elementary schools at 600. So trying to target these capacity numbers, and not only looking at what we're putting in based off of what we know with the student database that we have mapped out, but also with Dr. McKibben's knowledge of where the future growth is going to occur, and be proactive for future growth as well. And then also looking at keep the average bus route between 60 to 75 minutes. And so we'll be looking at, in addition to the neighborhood school concept, trying to keep kids closest to their home as possible, trying to also, that kind of goes hand in hand with efficient bus transportation, trying to keep kids as close to their school as possible from where they live, and that minimizes the amount of time kids have to spend on a school bus. So I'm going to go over our process a little bit. So we collect information, we take that information and put it together and analyze it, and then we go through a series of options development where we're putting some maps together, and then the fourth phase is actually meeting with the team and also the public, and making sure that all stakeholders are informed and understanding of what could potentially happen in terms of draft maps. We've collected data and information from the school district. They gave us information about the students, so we have all the students and we have mapped out the students so we know where all the students live, like I had mentioned. School capacity data, how the school boundaries are configured, and the city and county sources have been really helpful in giving us information on the subdivisions. So we have layers that show the subdivisions in the county, all the property lines, so that we can make sure that we don't draw lines down the middle of a property and through the middle of a property and things like that, in roads and rivers and water bodies and things like that. Dr. McKibben uses the census and IRS very extensively to help understand the population base in an area, as well as IRS helps us understand migration. So IRS tells us how many people are coming in, how many are going out based off the tax records. And so that's really a good resource for the demographic study side of this work. Dr. McKibben, if you could, I have this is your piece. I wanted to introduce Dr. McKibben so that he could talk a little bit about the demographic study work that he's done in the past, as well as we have an evaluation up here for you.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to go over briefly the demographic side of this. Probably the most important thing when you're doing redistricting, trying to accomplish, is not having to go back and do it again 3 years later. You want to draw into the trends. Very, very important to do that. And to do that, you need a both population and enrollment forecast. Now, we did one for the district last year. And this is the evaluation at the school level. We also looked at the grade level as well. We're about 100 too high, about 0.8%. But the bulk of that was transition from Brunswick County Academy to the Coast Project. Almost 80% of the area was in high schools. So pretty confident on this. Now, the logical question that I think brought up already is why in the world would you do a new forecast series if the last one is so accurate? Well, a couple reasons. One, this was used for basic long-term planning and staff. We're going to do it in a little more detail this time to look at more specific areas that might be moved from one census area to another. Second reason is a lot of the parameters and assumptions have changed. When these forecasts were done a year ago, the 30-year fixed interest rate had just broken 5% for the first time in almost 12 years. It's now back down to 4.2. Big, big, big change. Secondly, development plans have changed from a year ago to right now. And third, the pace of existing home sales has also changed between two periods of time. And that's probably the most important variable because 80% of your housing market is existing home sales. New home construction is just the gravy on top. They look at all these variables in concert, unique to each individual attendance area. So, key ones, of course, we're looking at our Lincoln and Belleville and Town Creek. Those are the ones we have the most detail on because those are the ones most likely to see some kind of modification of the boundaries. Okay. What we'll do is do a full population forecast for each one of the attendance areas, and the results of that population forecast drives an enrollment forecast. It's a two-step procedure. So it's the dynamics of each individual area, their own demographic dynamics, that dictates the future enrollment, not what past trends have been. So, and again, one of the key factors is what's the number of empty nest homes that are turning over, being sold, and letting new young households move in. So we're going to do that, measure that right at the area level, and then we match GIS capabilities. We can look at these demographic characteristics down to the block level if need be, make modifications. Is it going to make sense today? Is it going to make sense in 2025? Make sense in 2030? We're going to try to draw into the trends.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. So one of the things that you will see when we start sharing information and data with you is what we call planning blocks. So these are, when you look at a map, and these haven't been fully finalized yet for Brunswick County, but we're very close. So I think in the next couple of weeks, or within the next week, I would imagine, you'll start to see these on our interactive map that I'll talk about in a second. But do you look, they look like black and white dashed outlines. On the interactive map, it may be like a pink colored outline as an overlay on the map. And when you start looking at these, you'll see that we have a planning block ID number for every single school, for every single planning block area. And then within that planning block is the bottom number shows the number of students that live inside that planning block that goes to public schools, the Brunswick County schools. this helps the public understand how many students live in different areas, and really these are the building blocks for redistricting. As we start looking at this, we'll start moving these blocks back and forth from school to school to try to balance out utilization and accomplish our objectives. These blocks are developed based off of, when we look at the county, we look at the subdivision layers. We try not to split a subdivision in half when we do that, to align with subdivisions and neighborhoods and keep neighborhoods intact. Try not to draw the line down residential streets and things like that, and trying to keep communities intact so that if a community does move, it moves together. And you know, as we work through this, when you start to see planning block data on there, we have a general feedback form. If there's a planning block that you feel is violating our criteria, and say you feel like it's splitting a neighborhood, something like that, that's information that you can tell us, like, this planning block 175 is splitting our neighborhood, and if you drew it down this street instead, it would be a more viable block. That kind of input is something that we do listen to, and we understand and take that in, as well as all the other information that's being provided. But we do look for constructive feedback like that can help us drive maybe changes to the maps, and also making sure that we best adhere to the guidelines and the criteria. We have an online map, and this online map is available now. You can open it with any tablet or phone, any device. Anybody with an internet connection can access it. It's croppermap.com/BCS, and it's just it's an interactive map that you can turn on, and you can zoom in on that map. You can pinch zoom and start to see information on there. There's also if you're looking on your phone, if there's on the far left, there's a little arrow that you can click on, and it expands a layer list, expands it out, and you could turn on the elementary, middle, and high school boundaries, so you can kind of see the boundaries and where the schools are located. And this is, we've just got this map created in the last couple of days, but we're continuing to develop it. We're going to put the planning blocks on this map, and then eventually when we get into the options and they're ready to be shared with the public, options will be posted on here so that you can kind of see, toggle on and off different options, and see and zoom in your area and turn on and off the different options to see how you may be affected or not as it relates to some of the redistricting work that we're doing. So this has been a very good tool, useful tool for the public, as well as myself and consultants. When we're in town, we pull this map up all the time and look and see where we're at, and how, you know, where we are in relation to the boundaries that are configured for the schools. This is kind of a snapshot of this map, so you can see you got the county here, and your elementary zones are showing on this map, and the new middle school sits right in this area, which we will be putting a point on the map for the new middle school shortly. And then over here is where I was talking about. You could turn on and off different layers, and you can. There's also something we're going to build in here, a zoom to subdivision feature, so people can go to their subdivision and it zooms right into the subdivision that they're at, and just to inform you guys and let you understand how you may be impacted, so that you can see how the maps are shaped. And as you go in further on the map, more information will start to pop up. The planning block layers you could turn on and off, and this is an example in Frederick, Maryland, but when we have it developed for you, it'll look much like this. You have planning blocks, you can turn on the elementary, middle, and high school labels. You can when you zoom in, you start to see more roads and property lines start to show up and things like that. More detail shows up as you zoom in on the map. So that's something that will be a useful tool for the public and all people who are interested in this process. We will be developing some options to start. Dr. McKibben and myself and our staff will be working together to develop a series of options to start. And we're doing that. We're starting next week. We're meeting. He's in South Carolina. I'm in Ohio. But we're going to get together for a couple of days and really dive into maps, start working and developing options. These are just baseline options that we're developing for starters. And then we're going to take these to the planning team to start working with them and sharing them with the planning team, the administrative team, and evaluating these options and seeing if are there any red flags as it relates to areas that should be adjusted to best adhere to our criteria and our objectives. So we always start with a couple of maps for starters and to kickstart the process, and then these maps will continue to be evaluated and modified. The most important part of this is open and transparency, and making sure that the public is involved and that you can start to see maps as soon as they are ready to be shared with you. And so we do intend on sharing you with you maps and statistics that show the utilization of the schools, how many students will be impacted, how feeder patterns may be impacted in terms of elementary schools, if they do an elementary school splits to a middle school or a middle school splits to a high school, how that's involved and things like that. And so we will do our best to inform you and give you as much information as possible. And that's in addition to the materials that we have built. The district has a web page that's out there right now, and it's a redistricting page that has a repository for all materials. This is being recorded now, live streamed, and it will be saved and posted online, so people who couldn't make it to this meeting tonight can come back and watch this, as well as a link to the interactive map and some other, and all statistics when they're ready are going to get posted on the district's web page. In addition to the web page, the district is really taking a proactive effort to engage the public and make sure that you're informed. They're going out with social media and newsletters and flyers and trying to talk to the press to make sure people understand what's happening and that you can be informed with when new materials are out and things like that. So this is the timeline, like I mentioned. We're right here in October. So in about a month, we're going to be sharing some maps with you, some options to get some input from you guys. And that's really the next time that the public is going to be invited to come out to an information session. It's going to be a different format where we're going to have a presentation, but then we'll have maps around the room for you guys to look at, and we'll be there to talk with you about those maps. But like I said, the web page for the district is bcswan.net/redistricting. And if you go to the main page on Brunswick County site, you can get to it pretty easily. There's many different spots to link to that. We also have a feedback form that's on there, and it's out there right now. It's a general feedback form. You'll notice that everybody who came in and picked up a packet of information has some of this, just the key background information on here. You'll see a QR code here. This is something that if you want, you can pull up your smartphone, and if you point your phone to this, it'll take you a link right to the feedback form. So if you have any comments or input, even after tonight, even after this session, you can start to give us input and ask questions, and we'll start putting together a FAQ and making sure that we respond to the questions that you have, and also taking in your comments and seeing if any comments can help drive changes to the maps. That public info session is another one that I mentioned that is critical to have you guys come out to, so that we can share some maps with you at that time. And we do intend on sharing maps with you before November 18th. When those maps are ready to be shared, we will post those out online and then let you see them and review them prior to coming to the November 18th meeting. So that is our goal. So that's all we have for the public info session tonight. And so, we really appreciate you guys coming out and learning about this process. We encourage you to stay informed through the webpage and other communications like I mentioned, and look forward to working with you guys on this. So thank you very much. You guys have a good evening.